Okay, good evening, everyone. Welcome to our latest episode of Horror Hangouts. And tonight I have a really special guest. I have Molly Oblivion, who is the host of the Final Girl Friday YouTube channel, and kind of a fairly new channel, but she's not new to the podcasting world. Um, so, hello, Molly. How's everything going?
Hey, it's nice to be here. And yeah, things are going pretty well. I'm excited to be talking about the YouTube channel since it is, like you said, very, very new. And just to kind of be on YouTube, even just hanging out, doing a live stream with you on YouTube, it's exciting. And I'm doing pretty well.
Excellent, excellent. I know prior to the YouTube channel, you then had your Spotify channel where you had pretty much the same. I guess it's kind of like the same type of format. What made you start the Spotify podcast in the first place?
Yeah, so I actually, when I started the Final Girl Friday podcast, which was in late 2019, I actually started on Anchor.fm before they were purchased by Spotify. So it was an independent platform at the time.
Okay.
And I started with Anchor because it was a free podcasting platform. They kind of offered a sort of variety of like free tools, resources, things that you could use if you were new to
Hmm.
podcasting, which I was. And then somewhere along the line, I don't even remember when, but Anchor was bought by Spotify, and then was Anchor itself was sort of phased out, and now all the Anchor podcasts are just on Spotify. But yeah, I started. Really, I wasn't even calling it a podcast when I first
Hmm.
started doing Final Girl Friday. I actually referred to it as the very antiquated audio blog. I just wanted a place to talk about horror movies. I didn't really have a whole lot of uh, friends in real life who were, I had a lot of friends
Hmm.
in real life, but none of them were really as into horror as I was. And I wanted to find people who were living, breathing, thinking about horror movies 24 hours a day. And I thought just sort of rambling about movies was a good way to accomplish that. And then it just sort of grew into something entirely different from there.
Yeah, because that's you recorded. I mean, you had several episodes because I was going through some of them. What made you want to like transition over to YouTube?
So the YouTube situation, because what I was doing with the podcast was deep dives. I was doing these
Mm.
if you've if you checked out the show,
Yeah.
you know they're like heavy deep dives, hour and a half long episodes where I would spend weeks researching a movie.
Hmm.
Usually, I would try to interview someone who had either been involved with the film or was an avid fan of the film as well, so that would be a part of it. And so it was a big effort, and it took a lot of time that I ended up having some pretty major health issues last year, and then I started
Hmm.
college full time, and then I moved out of state into a different kind of living situation where I don't have my own studio. Like right now, I'm sitting in a closet. So there were
Right.
just a lot of things that kind of piled on to one another where it's like, okay, I don't have the time or the equipment to do the show that I used, the way that I used to do
Hmm.
it. And I didn't want to go back to TikTok because I'd been on TikTok for about a year and I loved it, but I kept getting shadow banned. I guess I guess it's pretty common in the horror community on TikTok.
Okay.
And so I just got really frustrated. Yeah. Um, but so yeah, so then I decided, okay, well, I want to keep talking about horror movies, but I need to do it in a shorter form. Um, and I had always been really scared to do videos, but I said, you know what? Screw it. I'm gonna give it a shot and decided to bring it over to YouTube. So I could still it's similar to Final Girl Friday, the podcast, but much shorter, much more truncated. And I only do
Right.
sort of surface research for the most part, unless I fall into a rabbit hole.
Exactly. Would you think you'll ever like transition like some of the YouTube videos over to your Spotify podcast? Because that's what I kind of do. I kind of like post this live on YouTube, and then a few days later, I put it on my Spotify channel. Basically, it's exact same thing. It's just my way of like kind of trying to branch out a little bit. But would you think you ever go back to Spotify?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think it's a good idea. I'm always more comfortable just being listened to rather than looked at. So, like any opportunity I have to take my content and make it audible only, I'm happy to do that.
Yeah.
And so, and I'm sure that I probably will. I wanted to bring all my podcast episodes over to YouTube from Spotify as well, and kind of make them sort of listenable with like graphics. But I'm still not really. I just sort of experimented with that, and I'm not really sure how
Mhm.
popular they'd be over here because I know on YouTube it's, sort of shorter form. Again, not necessarily like, 10-minute videos, but like hour and a half long deep dives. I don't really know that YouTube is the best place to post those if there's no visual elements. I don't know.
Well, yeah, you might be right. I mean, I've done videos here on this channel where we've done like where I'll have like a group panel and we'll like
Hmm.
let's say for example we'll do like last October we discussed the entire Halloween franchise and
Yeah.
that went God that video I think went over like 2 hours easy
Well, see, but
discussing
that's, were you
but
guys on
it
video
seemed to be
though?
pretty popular.
Yeah.
Yes, we were on video. So
Hmm.
and I
Hmm.
don't think I even really included any slides or whatnot. And sometimes I have in the past. I'll do that, like when I do like my top 25 favorite horror movies of the 80s or the 70s. I did have a little
Hmm.
slideshow going, but that's about it. But you never know. I think it kind of probably depends on the subject or whatever. But because I've seen some popular YouTube videos where they do go where it's just a couple people just talking about horror and it'll go an hour, maybe even 2 hours long, and they seem to get plenty of views. Now those are much bigger channels too than mine or yours, but
Well,
it
and I
might
think
be
too, you
something
have an
worth it. You
advantage.
could almost mhm.
Sorry.
Go ahead.
I'm so sorry. I didn't mean to interrupt you. But no, I think too that there's an
Oh, you
advantage when
didn't
you have
actually.
multiple people. It's just it's a little tough sometimes when it's just you. When it's just one person, because it's more like you're monologuing for an hour and a half.
Hmm.
Whereas when you have other people around you, you can sort of riff and kind of play off of each other. And it's more like when I watch people talk back and forth, it's more like I'm just sort of sitting in on a conversation, which is really easy to engage in and really easy to like get lost in
Right.
the conversation. But when it's just one person talking, I think there's a lot more pressure to kind of perform. And so that's where I worry about, because like I do have interviews on my show, and I'm not even really all that worried about views. It sounds like I'm obsessed with views. I'm really not. But like when thinking about the content and where it would be best
Right.
suited, I do have some interviews on my show, but then I have episodes like my re-anniversary episode where I talked about all the Reanimator movies. That was almost 2 hours long, and it was just me. There was nobody. It was just me monologuing about
Yeah.
Reanimator for 2 hours, and like I just, there's pressure there to kind of like make it more interesting for people. you know.
Right. Right. And that's where I mean, I know for the most part, I'm kind of like you where I would prefer definitely have someone to work off of. Just me
Mhm.
talking, I just would think that would be the most boring thing in the world, unless I have a few people in the live stream chat that are chatting back and forth with me. Then I got someone I'm working off of. But ideally, yeah,
Mhm.
I like having at least a guest like yourself on here because me just sitting here, I could probably just sit here and read one of my books for an hour or something like that. But
Right.
I thought about just doing that for the fun of it to
Yeah.
see
Mm.
what the what that would be. Probably my least watched videos, probably what it would end up being. But so yeah, it is kind of nice to have someone to
I
work
don't know,
off
man.
of
I
or a
love
group of people to
audiobooks,
work.
so
Yeah, not for
yeah.
my voice. I hate my voice. So talk about stepping out of my
Oh
comfort
no.
zone doing these things. But no, that's
No, I
I think
get
we're
that.
all
But
like
as
that. I
as
think
a
we're all
voice actor,
subconscious
you don't
probably
have a
too.
bad voice. Hmm.
Mm,
No, it's true. It's, well,
I'll keep that in mind.
I mean, I've heard a lot of, it's true. I've heard a lot of voices, and not just from voice acting myself and working with other voice actors, but I am currently in the process of producing, well, a very long process of producing a short film where I had to audition dozens upon dozens of voice actors for the movie. And I'm telling you, you don't have a bad voice. Just take it from me. You really don't. I've heard really bad voices.
Okay.
Hmm.
Cool. Um, so what is like right now your new YouTube show? Um, what would you say is the over? You have like a specific theme and format for it. So why don't you explain to the audience, those that
Mhm.
haven't seen your show, what you normally focus on as far as the movies you talk about?
Yeah, so uh, my favorite movies tend to be the underdog movies, the ones that kind of go either unnoticed or that get sort of beaten down
Mm-hmm.
unnecessarily by they get hitched to like a hate train. And I think that there is, especially within the realm of horror, that there is value in almost every film. There, of course, will even trash cinema, which I'm a huge fan of trash cinema. It has its value, it has its place, and so I primarily focus on horror films that have either been forgotten or torn apart. And so, yeah, the majority of the movies I talk about are relatively unpopular, or just or might be very popular, but with only a niche crowd. Like the movie that I'll be doing next is Road
Exactly.
Games, and it's a very
Mm-hmm.
popular movie among the people that have seen it, but like 10 people have seen it. So it's like that kind of a thing. Yeah.
Oh yeah, I get that. I mean, what would you say some of your favorites? As far as like whether you want to call them hidden gems or the ones say. I don't know if I like this term or not, but your guilty pleasures, or what are some of your favorites in that particular genre? I
Yeah, for sure.
guess of.
Yeah, no, I don't have any guilty pleasures because I don't believe in that. I think it's really important for us to just like what we like. Don't feel guilty about it. It's just
Exactly.
enjoy what you enjoy. But yeah, like some of my favorite horror movie of all time is Reanimator. And I know that that is not a hidden
Okay.
gem. That is, obviously people have long realized
No.
what a masterpiece it is. But I'm also a really big fan of, like, for example, there's a film called Sundown: The Vampire in Retreat, which is one of Bruce Campbell's earlier films. It's sort of a neo-western. It's got one of the Carradine brothers in it. And Max Caulfield, Sexy Rexy from Empire Records. Very unknown film.
Hmm.
I never hear anyone talk about it. Absolutely love it. It's pretty much a trash horror comedy. Um, but I love that. I also love Dead and Buried. That's another one of my all-time favorite films from 1981. I think it's beautiful. It's like one long Twilight Zone episode, and yeah, it's one that I really love. Have you seen Dead and Buried?
Oh yeah. A long time ago. It's been a while. I'm like I can't remember. There's been a couple movies you talked about there was on Slasher or on your channel that I picked up. What was the one about the death dialogue? That was
Death by
one,
Dialogue. Yeah.
and I think that's what it was called. And then the other one,
Mhm.
yeah, but the one I really liked, and I don't think you've covered it on your channel, but it was a Halloween film. What was it called? Slash O Lantern or um
Oh, Hack O Lantern.
now I can't. Now the title's escaping me. It was like about this guy, basically this
Was
old
it?
grandpa who's basically a devil worshiper that's like trying to make his grandson into his acolyte or something like that. And there's like
Yeah,
he
it's
has the
it's
grandson
Hack
also
O
has a brother
Lantern.
who's a cop and has a younger sister. That's it. That one I really liked. Even though I kind of saw I could see the
Yeah.
twist coming a mile away, but
Yeah. No, so yeah, that's Hack-O-Lantern is what you're thinking of. I actually did mention it in my Death by Dialogue video because I also love Hack-O-Lantern. It's great. It's great to hear people talk about it. I mean, it's pure garbage. I mean, in so many ways, but it's also delightful. I love it so much. And one of the things I talked about was how DC LaCroix, the band that plays the song Devil's Son in Hack-O-Lantern during that weird voodoo dream sequence
hmm.
that he has, is like one of my favorite songs of the 80s. So like there's again, you can find value in everything. Hack-O-Lantern, if nothing else, has one of the most badass 80s songs in it. So yeah, I love
Oh yeah.
Hack-O-Lantern. Yeah.
Yeah, that one I really enjoyed, so that was a good one. Um, but yeah, I mean, it's always fun finding those movies that no one talks about, or even if it's a movie that everyone hates, that you end up finding enjoyment about it. Because I think you're right. I
Mhm.
mean, you could find there's so many different subgenres in horror. I don't think you
Mhm.
can go wrong if you only like this particular subgenre. If you happen to like this one and everyone hates it, it's doesn't matter if you end up liking it, then
Mhm.
great, you know.
Well, yeah, and I mean, that goes for popular films as well. Like for I don't do it on purpose. I'm not intentionally trying to be a contrarian, but like my favorite Scream film is Scream 3, the least popular Scream
Mhm.
film. It's my favorite. One of my two favorite Halloween films are 6 and H2O, two of the most unpopular Halloween films. Like I don't do this on purpose, but it's just I tend to flock toward the movies that are just sort of less liked, and I can't help it. So I figured, why not turn this into content? Why not talk about these movies that I love, that everybody else seems to hate, and defend them and point out that, like, and there are always going to be people that like them out there as well, so to let them know that they're not alone. you
Mhm.
know um like I also get a really big kick out of like the PG-13 horror films that everyone's always hating on, like Wish Upon, Slender Man, Bye Bye Man. I enjoy those movies. Do I think they're great movies? No, I do not. But I get a huge kick out of them, and so I like to talk about those as well, because I feel like people go on the internet and say things like, "The guy who made this movie should kill himself," and it's like, dude, it's not that deep. It's not that bad. Let's just dial it
Yeah,
back.
you get a lot of that in social media. It's like,
Mhm.
um, and people will
Mhm.
actually. I mean, I saw one thread on Facebook, and I don't not normally not on Facebook, but it's like this guy was intentionally wanting to start something. He like, all right, here's the guy's post. Goes, post your least your like whatever your least favorite series as a whole. And I'm like, why? So now you're just inviting a bunch of
Mhm.
hatred. You're inviting people to post unpopular opinions so everyone can get into a brawl, basically. And I'm just like,
Oh, it's
why?
rage bait.
I
Yeah.
try to like focus more on stuff.
Yeah.
I kind of like focus more on stuff that I like than I do on stuff I dislike whenever possible. But
Mhm.
like last
No, and
month,
I agree with
guess
that.
that we were talking about some of like our favorite, like our. Mhm. But like for me, like
Please.
a movie like Warlock 3, I think it's way too much hate.
Mhm.
But just because I think it gets hate because Julian Sands didn't come back as the Warlock, but still a pretty
Mhm.
good movie if you really sat and watched it and judged it on its own merits. And I think a lot of people did that with Halloween 3, and people came along, came around to that movie over time. So
No, yeah, exactly. And I completely agree that I feel like film criticism there I understand the pressure to be critical when you are criticizing something, or when you are critiquing something. There's Your instinct is to be critical and to point out all the things that are wrong
mhm,
with it. And I get that. I really do. I'm not trying to take that away from anyone. But at the same time, there are now, with the internet, there are tens of thousands of people out there pointing out what's wrong with these movies. And so what I want to do is point out what's right with them. I want to focus on the good aspects of these
right.
films that have been primarily, sort of either dragged or, like I said, neglected, because for the things that have been heavily criticized. And that's like what I was talking about with Frankenstein's Army, which was the first video that I did for YouTube. I'm very passionate about that movie, and I will never stop fighting for it, because I think that it should be a cult classic. I think that it should be hailed as it should be hailed as a triumph of practical effects of the 2010s. I really think so. And I will never stop fighting, but everybody was like, "Oh, it's all style, no substance. There's no story here." Blah, 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 blah. And so I was like, "Okay, there are what a
Mhm.
thousand people saying this movie lacks substance. I'm going to be somebody who talks about the substance that it has, or the other aspects of the film that have merit, independent of the substance." And so that's kind of, I guess, like my mission, if I had one, is just to focus on the positives, because there are enough people focusing on
There you go.
the
Hmm.
negative. Yeah.
Right. And on the rare when I do critique something, and obviously when we were like having like say our Halloween franchise, there's some of the movies that I'm not a big fan of, But even then, I tried to like at least look. Well, they at least did this A, B, and C right, but X, Y, and
Hmm.
Z really bugged me or whatever. But and we had one person like defend Halloween Ends to the death, which most people, including myself, don't like the movie. But I'm like, all right, go for it. Let's hear your defense, and we'll respect that.
I love Halloween Ends. I'm sorry. So sorry. Halloween
That's all
Ends
right.
is my favorite film of the new Halloween. But see, that's what I'm talking about. I didn't do that on purpose.
Well,
Like, I
that's a
didn't
low
set
bar
out
though,
to
but
love Halloween Ends. It is a low bar.
right,
It is a
right.
low bar. I will give you that.
Well, I'll
But
say
yeah,
this:
and
I
that's
like.
what it is. It's the
I'll say this.
compliment sandwich.
Right. I do like I'll say this, I liked Halloween Ends better than I did Halloween 2018,
Oh yeah, me
but
too.
not as
Yeah,
much
I
as
did not like
Halloween
Halloween
Kills.
2018.
So I'll give you that.
Yeah. Well, and see, I have a theory about that though, and I don't know how true this theory is for everyone, but I've been working on this theory for a while that if you are more a fan of Michael Myers than any of the heroes in the Halloween franchise,
Mhm.
like if you love Halloween for Michael, Halloween Kills is a fantastic movie. If, however, you love Halloween for Laurie, or obviously not Loomis, but like the Loomis characters, if you love Halloween for
Mhm.
Haddonfield and the good people of Haddonfield, Halloween Ends is a great movie for you. And so for me personally, I tend to root for the heroes. I don't root for the killers. I might be entertained by the killers, but they're not necessarily my favorite aspect of the film. So I think that's why I liked Halloween Ends, because same reason I love H2O. I love seeing Laurie, in particular, Laurie Strode, winning against Michael. I love seeing her being victorious. I love Haddonfield being safe again. I love the idea of Michael being stopped. And so that's why I prefer Halloween Ends, whereas Halloween Kills, it's too depressing to me. It's too depressing a movie. I just couldn't get into it. But I think if you really love Michael Myers and you love watching him kill people, Halloween Kills is amazing. So
And and enjoy acting him or acting more like Jason than Michael really in that film. I mean,
hmm yeah.
I will grant you with H2O, it's not a movie that I hate. I think it has its flaws, but I will say I think it's Jamie Lee Curtis's best version of that character is in H2O because she's
Thank
traumatized,
you.
but not overly traumatized. That's why I didn't like
hmm
2018. That movie made me dislike Laurie Strode because I'm like, okay, come on.
Yes.
It's now been 40 years, okay? And
hmm
you've retconned everything else other than the first one. So you got a little scratch and you twisted your ankle and you're
hmm
acting like Sarah Connor in the middle of the woods someplace. Doesn't make any sense.
Thank you. That's
But
exactly that's
that
exactly
was
how
my
I
critique,
feel. Like,
one of my big critiques of it. So
no, that's amazing, because that's exactly how I feel. I felt like if you're going to ignore everything that Laurie went through after the first film, why is she so
mhm,
traumatized all these decades later? Yes, it was a horrible thing to have happen to her, but she is carrying the weight of the entire franchise on her in 2018, which makes no sense. And it's like and that's what I loved about H2O. It was an isolated incident from her past that, yes, gave her PTSD. She has serious issues as a result of it, but she is able to power through and kind of live her life. She's still human. She's not a robot. She's just, she's vulnerable. And
mhm,
I love her in H2O.
right,
As a Laurie Strode fan, H2O is my favorite film for her. So it's just really great to hear somebody else say that. And that was what I didn't like about 2018, because I'm like, where is Laurie? This character has become unrecognizable now. And I felt like they sort of softened up on her a little bit and gave her a
I
little bit more of
agree.
that vulnerability as it went on. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I will say this: I wasn't a big fan of Ends, but I'm like, all right, the way Lori was in Ends is how she would should have been in 2018. In other words,
hmm
she's a little bit traumatized,
hmm
but she's moved on, which didn't really make any sense and
hmm
ends because her daughter, who I couldn't stand anyway, so I was like kind of fine that anyone who wears a Christmas sweater on Halloween deserves to get Okay, but anyhow, you would think that she would have been on a rampage and ends, but instead she's moved on,
Hmm.
and it's like, well, you
Hmm.
should have like flipped it there. But I just don't think the writers, and the director, just my opinion, I don't think they understand Halloween as much as they think they do. I think they look at Halloween as just another slasher franchise and don't understand that it's a little bit different than some of the other ones, I think.
No, that's very true. And but I mean that's just kind of what's been done to the franchise in my opinion since the very first film, which I
Mm.
say that as somebody who loves a lot of the Halloween movies. In fact, I love most of them. I feel like nobody ever understood it again. I mean, obviously you have the second film, which was largely a lot of the same people, which is great, and I also love Halloween too, but it's still, they just could not, they just kept drifting further and further away from what made the first one special, and they haven't ever been able to get it back since. And I think some people have done it better than others. Don't get me started on Rob Zombie. I apologize. I have not seen your Halloween episodes or videos, so I don't know how you feel about Rob Zombie's Halloweens. I am very angry with him for everything he did to the franchise.
Love them, but
But
well, I like them.
yeah. No, and a lot of people do, and that's totally fine. But
That's all right. I almost right, and I can get why some people don't necessarily like the Rob Zombie movies. I like them. I'm not gonna say I love them. The first one I like a lot more than the second, but even the second, I have some enjoyment from it, from a different perspective
Mhm.
than some people. But for example, I do think one thing he got did a little bit better is I think some of the betrayal of the characters in his version are actually better. Like for example, I like the kids, Lindsay and Tommy better in Rob Zombies because I think they had a little more personality to them. And that's not
Hmm.
to say anything bad about the OG cast. They did fine with what they were
Right,
doing
right.
and how they were doing it, but I would say I like Brad Dourif better as Sheriff Brackett because he's just a better actor, I think.
Mhm.
And I think Daniel Harris was a little bit better as Annie. So I could give you some positives of what I liked about.
Mhm.
Now, is Malcolm McDowell as great of an actor as he is he as good as Donald Pleasance? No. But he was good. He did something different with the role, but that's kind of like my take on it.
No, and I like that, and I find that interesting. It's
But trust me, my
back when
favorite,
I did.
yeah,
Sorry, I think we're on a little bit of a delay too, so I'm so sorry if it seems like I'm interrupting you. I swear I'm not trying to.
we are. I think
Um,
it
but
might be my internet, but
right, I know you said your weather was pretty bad today, so but I'm just so sorry. But no, I covered I talked about Halloween 2 briefly in one of the very first episodes I ever did of the Final Girl Friday podcast. It was actually one of the reasons I started the podcast was so I could do an entire episode about remakes, and I talked about Halloween 2, and the one of the compliments that I paid to it then is the cast. It has a wonderful cast. I think that he did a really great job of picking modern to contemporary actors to fill those roles in ways that worked really well and expanded on them. And so I completely agree with you. I love Brad Dourif as Sheriff Brackett. I think that was a stroke of casting genius. Like hats off to him. It was such a good choice. My main issue is just that what I really love about Haddonfield is the idyllic setting, and I love Michael Myers as that disembodied sort of that allegorical evil lurking
hmm
on the outskirts of an otherwise pleasant suburb where you think you're safe, you think that the world is, you know, fine and dandy, everything's great and wholesome, but no, there's an evil right over here lurking. And so to me, there are two things that kind of kill that vibe. One is the trash aesthetic of Rob Zombie and the fact that he sort of trashed up the characters so that it was a little
hmm
bit less
I get
wholesome.
it.
And yeah, and two, the backstory, which of course came, more in the second film than the first. But the more you explain Michael, and I realize I'm a hypocrite because they do this in 6 and I love 6, but the more you explain Michael or try to explain him, and the more you sort of trash up Haddonfield, the less comforting those movies are for me, and I love how comforting the Halloween franchise is. And so Halloween, if it had been called something else, if he had just not done it as Halloween and just done it as his own like original slasher movies, I would have loved them. But I just can't
Mhm.
separate I can't separate it. You know?
Right.
Yeah.
I get that. Yeah, I can get that, for sure, and I was just
But I get where
thinking,
you're coming from
I'm worried
too. Yeah.
about them trying to do this. Yeah, I worry about what they're going to do with this Crystal Lake TV series. It's like, do we really
Mhm.
need a big backstory in Pamela Voorhees? We already know
No.
we already know the basic
No, we
story.
don't.
Her son drowned,
Mhm.
she went batshit crazy and started killing camp counselors. Do we need to know any more
What
about her? And I don't think we do.
Right. What more do you need? Like that's the thing is we can't turn off our and I get it, you're a writer, I'm a writer. We understand the need
Mhm.
for context and backstory and world building and there's nothing wrong with it. But I just wish that we could apply that urge, that impulse to new IPs and new stories and new characters instead of just constantly going back like what we've
Mhm.
done with Texas Chainsaw, just constantly going back and trying to inject new stories into the same characters and the same, you know, I don't need backstory on Pamela. I don't. It might be entertaining, but I don't need it. You know?
Yeah,
Sorry,
I
I'm
don't
yelling,
either.
but
And I don't think it's what the fans want anyway. The fans want another Jason movie. That's basically what they want. They want the hockey
Mhm.
mask. They want the kills. They want the teens getting drunk, stoned, having sex, and Jason killing
Mhm.
them. And then, hopefully you give us like at least a couple good final characters, whether it's final girl, final guy, whether it's Tommy or Jenny or whomever. That's what we want basically,
Mhm.
and we don't want a long 8 episode series describing Pamela Voorhees' descent into madness. We already know why she went
Mhm.
mad. I don't get it, but
Yeah.
it
No,
is
it's
what
true.
it
We
is. I'll
just we
probably
just don't
give
need
it
it.
a chance. No,
Same.
but and trust me, my actual favorite franchise is the Hellraiser franchise, but I will concede I only count the first 4 movies as canon, and I do like the reboot and everything in the middle. I just tried not to remember they even exist, but that's another story
Well,
there.
no, and I feel so badly because, of course, your favorite franchise is probably one of the only long-running horror franchises that I am not very familiar with. I've seen the first 4. I mean, you know, I've seen all the way up to Bloodlines, and then I did watch the reboot. But I guess it works out because I
That's
haven't
all you need
seen
to
any
see.
of the movies after 4. Yeah, and so it works out, I guess, because I know. Well, my boyfriend is really into the later Hellraiser movies as you know, like good fun trash watches, and he's been trying to get me to watch oh god, what is the
Hmm.
one that he's been Hellborn? He's been trying to get me to watch Hellborn. Isn't that what it's called?
You mean Hell
Hellraiser
World?
Hellborn. Hellworld. Sorry, I
I
couldn't
don't think
remember. See,
there's
I'm
one
not
that's
very
called
familiar with
Hellborn.
it. I'm not very familiar with it. I'm sorry.
I will say this
Hellworld.
about no, that's fine. You're pure right now. You haven't been destroyed yet. It's not like they're all awful. They're just not. They don't feel like they're canon with anything that the first,
Mhm.
specifically the first 2 movies established. They just feel off. A lot of those were scripts that weren't Hellraiser scripts that the studio, our lovely favorite brothers, the Weinsteins, got a hold of because they had the movie rights. Oh, let's just copy and paste
Yeah.
Pinhead in the puzzle box in it and call it a Hellraiser movie. And that's basically what they did. So it really, I, besides what their greatest sin is, their next greatest sin is spraying diarrhea all over my favorite franchise. So for that and their other sins, I like to beat them with a baseball bat. But anyhow,
I'm so sorry. Yeah, no, and I definitely get that. I mean, knowing how unpopular they are, it does make me want to watch them. But that's just, you know, and someday I will watch the other Hellraiser movies. But I definitely understand that because it hasn't been done much to Reanimator, but the new Castle Freak film did kind of start shitting all over Reanimator a little bit in a way that really bothered me. Well, not Reanimator so much as just like Lovecraft's the world in the world that Lovecraft created, where Herbert West comes from. They were dipping their toes with the new Castle Freak into creating a new Herbert West to kind of go head to head against. Of course, I'm going to forget his name right now while I'm on camera. Did you see the new Castle Freak?
No, I haven't. I've only seen the original. I didn't know there was a new Castle Freak. I've only seen the original one
Yeah, they
from
remade
90,
it.
whatever, from the 90s.
4 or 5. Yeah. No, they remade it. It was an interesting take. They gender swapped the freak. The freak is a woman in the new Castle Freak, and I really loved the performance from that actress. She played a couple of different characters in the film actually, and they definitely got that like late night that late night Saturday night sort of hypersexual exploitative vibe going, which I was really shocked in this day and age that they were able to kind of nail that straight to video sort of softcore porn feel. I wasn't expecting it, but there were some things that they did that I didn't appreciate, and one of them happens at the end of the film, which I won't spoil for you now. They brought in throughout the film this young, sleek, pretty boy looking. He looks like an Instagram model. That is sort of like the scholar of this little friend group, but everything that he says sounds so completely divorced from reality. Like he's an actor. He's a pretty actor trying to sound like a Lovecraftian scholar. And in the end, they reveal that he is a pretty major character from Lovecraft's universe, and he sort of is going to be going head to head with Herbert West, a new Herbert West. And that was my moment of like, hey, let's not shit all over my favorite franchise, because that's exactly what you're about to do. So I get that was my point,
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I didn't even know they made a remake of that. So news to me.
From a gore perspective, it's interesting. See, it's worth watching for the gore. If you like gore.
I do. So,
you like Hellraiser, so you should.
I was gonna say, so where? Yeah, obviously, and sometimes gore depends on how it's. It's funny. I just watched those first 2 movies last night, but I was gonna say, where do you think your love of horror began exactly? Can you pinpoint when you like? Oh, I really love this thing called horror.
Absolutely, I love this question. It's my favorite question to ask other people. So please prepare an answer for me as well, because I would really like to hear your origin story with horror, if you don't mind. But yeah, so for me, it was twofold. I saw Halloween 2. I was a little girl. And I don't remember how old I was, probably, too young, like 5, 6, something like that. When I saw Halloween 2, it scared the ever-living crap out of me. And after that, obviously I liked something about it because I kept sort of chasing that feeling after that, and I wanted to be scared. I wanted to watch movies that scared me, but it wasn't my favorite genre until I was actually in my early 20s. So this was about 15, 16 years ago. I was at a double feature horror movie night at a friend's house. They called it Splatterhouse. It was a weekly thing. And they showed a double feature of From Beyond. It was a Stuart Gordon double feature of From Beyond and Reanimator. And so I was like, I want to say I was like, I don't know, 22 or 23. So it was close to 20 years ago, Jesus. But I saw From Beyond and Reanimator, saw Reanimator, and never looked back. I've been obsessed with the horror genre ever since I saw Reanimator. That's why it's my favorite, because it's the one that got me here today. Like everything I do is basically can be traced back to Reanimator.
Yeah, I understand that. For me, it was, God, I was 5 years old, and when I first watched Dracula, there was like a local television station that would show one of the old horror movies every Friday night. And I always like to say Dracula and Frankenstein made me fall in love with horror, and then Halloween and Hellraiser made horror my favorite genre. So it's like kind of that was just a steady progression. So it sounds like kind of the same with you a little bit.
Yeah, no, that's great. I'm actually jealous, I have to say, that you were sort of introduced to the genre through those classics, like Frankenstein and Dracula, because I didn't even see most of those until way later in my life. A lot of those sort of those classic horror films like Bela Lugosi's
Mhm.
Dracula and classic Frankenstein, Bride of Frankenstein. I didn't see any of those movies until I was in my 20s, and I wish that I had seen them when I was a kid. But for me, it was a lot of Wes Craven, a lot of John Carpenter, staying up late and watching TV with my ear pressed up against the speaker so my parents wouldn't know, like whatever was on TV on the weekends when I was a kid. And there was a lot of John Carpenter and Wes Craven in the mid to late 80s and early 90s.
Oh yeah, and that's I think I might be probably by the sounds of it. I'm guessing I'm probably a little bit older than you, so I was about whatever 13 or so when I first saw this was 87, so that's when I first saw Halloween and Halloween 2 back to back. It was on
Hmm.
TV, so it was like the TV cuts or whatever. And then it was about a year later, my
Hmm.
mom let me rent the first Hellraiser, and that blew my mind. And so it's like that's about that time frame, 87, 88 is when I would say that horror became my favorite. So, because
Hmm.
before that was
Yeah.
like mainly
No, that's
Star
awesome.
Wars and superhero movies.
Yeah, yeah. For me, it was. I also really loved not Star Wars. I was a Star Trek kid, um, so that's how popular I was, and so I was really into Star Trek growing up, and then like Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, and I was a little bit into X-Men, but that kind of stuff. But I was so young when I got into horror. I feel like I didn't have much of a chance to be into anything else. I liked a lot of the sort of headier horror films. Like I'm also a huge Dark City fan, just Alex Proyas in general. So like The Crow and Dark City, and I really like Jean-Pierre Jeunet. He did like Delicatessen, City of Lost Children. Those were all
Mhm.
movies I was really into in high school, pre-Reanimator. Um, and so I knew that I liked horror. I didn't consider myself a fanatic, and I didn't care that much about the behind the scenes stuff, and really getting to know the familiar faces in the horror family. Like, I didn't need to know about like John Carl Buechler or Stuart Gordon or Richard Band or any of that. Those kinds of people. Once I
Right.
got into Reanimator, it was like I want to know every single inch of these movies. I want to know everything about them. And that Reanimator was what did that for me.
That's a, and that's a great movie. I just watched. God, I think it was a couple of weeks ago. Over the course of a couple of weeks, I decided to revisit the three films: Reanimator, Bride of Reanimator, and Beyond Reanimator. And boy, I just love Jeffrey Combs every even more every time I watch those movies. And I've seen him in other stuff too, and he's fantastic.
Yeah, I'm a
Underrated
little
horror icon, I think. Him and
tiny
Barbara
bit
Crampton.
obsessed with Jeffrey Combs. Yeah, no, and I also love Barbara. She's amazing, and I love what she's been doing lately. I love the direction her career has taken and everything that she is accomplishing, everything she's doing for the horror community now, and like some of the more recent films that she's done, like Suitable Flesh and Jacob's Ladder, or Jacob's Wife, sorry, Jacob's Wife, are some of the best horror movies that we've had coming out in recent years. And so I know that if I see Barbara Crampton's name on something, I know that I'm in for a good time, and I love that she has become such an icon in that way.
Excellent. And that was something else we're going to ask. Since your channel is called Final Final Girl, who are some of your favorite Final Girls then?
Well, Laurie Strode, for one thing, and also Elena Maxwell, and who is the final girl in Terror Train, also played by Jamie Lee Curtis. I'm a huge fan of Elena Maxwell. I think she is one of the most badass final girls of the 1980s and very underappreciated. I know a lot of people are not all that wild about Terror Train. I love it, and I think that Elena is incredible. And Jamie Lee Curtis actually said that she felt that Elena was her best final girl. So Jamie also agrees with me. But so I love, yeah, I love Laurie Strode, Elena Maxwell. I love Max from the Final Girls. We're talking like a more contemporary Final Girl, and Tree Geldman from the Happy Death Day movies. I also
Okay.
love her. I like how they sort of turned the final girl trope on its head
Hmm.
with her, because she starts out, pretty immoral and pretty corrupt and not really likable, and then just becomes a better person. I love that. Um, and I also like some of the older final girls. As an older woman, I like seeing my age group represented in the horror genre. So I love like Carla Gugino's character in Gerald's Game. Big fan of her. And I also really love, of course, I'm going to forget her name, but the final girl from Demonic Toys. I love her as well. I can't remember her name now, but she's so tough. She's like this like tough cop, and I don't know. I just really like her a
Oh,
lot.
I can't remember her name either. So don't feel bad. I'm like, because you're like, I
Yeah.
like this because you're like, yeah, you pick Laurie Strode, which is favorite of many, but you also hit a lot of movies that a lot of people probably aren't aware of, which kind of just goes along with your channel anyway. So that's great. So yeah, gotta spread
Thank
the love
you.
to as many people as you can.
Well, yeah, and again, I don't do it on purpose.
Excellent.
I'm glad that I do it because I'm happy to be somebody who sort of points fingers toward things people haven't really seen.
Oh yeah. Um, do you think though, like in recent years, it seems like, and I'm not saying there have been some good final girls in the last whatever, say this decade or so, but you think that sometimes they just push out a final girl just for the sake of having one, and there's nothing really overly. They come across as bland and maybe unlikable. You think they're doing that a lot more these days with some of these movies that are coming out?
Well, I will say that's an interesting question. I will say that I think that characters in general, not just the final girls, but characters in contemporary horror films, specifically slasher formula horror films, are unlikable in general now. I feel like we have kind of forgotten how to write likable characters. It becomes more important to have this sort of like diverse group of friends who you're just sort of sitting there watching and scratching your head and wondering how the hell they're friends in the first place, because they don't seem to get along. They have nothing in common. They're just not very likable people. And that's one of the reasons why I cling to the 80s, especially as a genre. I know I'm obnoxious about that, but like I cling to the 80s because the 80s they really knew how to write
Mhm.
likable characters in their horror films. And we've really gotten further and further away from that. You have films again like The Final Girls, which is an excellent example. I think Vicious Fun, that's a sort of final boy situation. There are movies that have been released in recent years where they have been able to turn out likable characters,
Mhm.
but it's happening less and less, and it does upset me. Um, because you got to be able to invest in the characters, and you can't if you don't like them. If you're just wishing they
Mhm.
would leave the frame, you know.
Well, yeah, and that's like, and I don't think on this movie too much because I know people love it, but that was like my biggest problem with In a Violent Nature is none of these people are likable at all, and maybe that was the intent. But if that's going to be the case, then no one should survive. There shouldn't be a final girl, final guy.
Mhm.
But but I agree with you. I think it is bad writing. I mean, people can shit on like cheap '80s slasher movies all they want to, or any type of horror genre, but those people at least knew how to write likable characters. Friday the 13th has, especially chapter 4 or whichever chapter, has plenty of likable characters, and if you don't like anyone, then there's not going to be any or horror. The elements of horror really aren't going to be there if you're rooting for all these guys to be killed because they're all unlikable.
Right. No, absolutely. You can't have an entire cast of Chads. It doesn't work. You know, you need Chad. You need the Chad character,
or
but you
Karen.
can't have a whole cast or a Karen. You
Right.
need the Chad. You need the Karen, but the whole cast can't be Chads and Karens. And you have to have somebody that you can relate to. And I think part of it too is as we get older, not to turn this into an age conversation, but as we get older, it could also just be that we're relating less to young characters because maybe there are young people who see these detached, apathetic young people who are, just, I mean, just constantly miserable. And, maybe they are relating to them. I don't know what it's like to be a young person in 2025. Maybe it's true, but I can't relate to them. And I think too that there's an epidemic problem of hyper seriousness in the horror genre, probably highly connected to grief horror, which I love as a genre, but we kind of are forgetting how to have fun and the importance of those moments of levity, which again, the best writers of slasher films knew that likable characters and moments of levity are two things that you really need to tell a good slasher story, and we're trying to tell those slasher stories today with no levity and no likability, and that is a big problem to me. It's too serious, it's too edgy.
Yeah, and yeah, and I see the same problem with a lot of these. And keep in mind, I like all kinds of genres, and I like a lot of movies that are considered art house or elevated horror.
Same,
But
same.
but there are some of these too, and we're not even talking the slasher, where if you're gonna have a slow burn, then you better have a character that I'm gonna like or find relatable.
Hmm.
And what I find is these characters, whether it's bad writing or bad acting or bad directing, are just so bland and boring that I just turn off the
Hmm.
movie in 20 minutes. Like, screw it, I'm gonna go watch see what art movie I haven't seen yet and
Oh
watch that
yeah.
instead.
No, it's so true. Another genre that I think has suffered from that a lot, pretty much really since its inception, but especially recently, is found footage. And I'm just glad that you brought up the sort of the lack of likability with certain characters, because I recently went back and I'm on Letterboxd. Okay, sorry, this I promise this story is going somewhere. I'm on Letterboxd, and I'm doing this sort of challenge for myself right now where I've put together a list of the 100 lowest rated horror movies, like the lowest rated horror movies on Letterboxd. And I'm starting with number 100, and I'm going to watch them all the way up to number 1 and
Hmm.
try to figure out if I think they belong in the bottom 100. Like, is this movie so bad that it actually should be listed among the 100 lowest rated horror movies? And it's been a really fun experience. I've seen some crap, I've seen some good ones. And one of the movies I watched as part of that challenge was The Gallows, which I knew was very unpopular. And I loved the premise. I couldn't believe that that it was such a massively hated film. I'm like, what is wrong with it? I've got to finally find out. Sat down and watched The Gallows. Could not have hated those characters more if I'd tried. They were some of the most unlikable characters I'd ever seen in a movie. I don't know how I got through the film because I couldn't stand the people in it. And found footage especially is almost always by as part of its formula a slow burn. So you've got to like the characters, and 9 times out of 10 they get it wrong, and that really upsets me. It really makes me sad.
Hmm.
Yeah, sorry, that was kind of tangential, but
Yeah, yeah, it does too, and I think part of it is they sometimes especially with like these, I guess what you call grief horror, they make the main character that we're following. They're trying to make them like where we're sympathetic, but the character ends up being so insufferable that
mhm,
you just don't
mhm.
care anymore. And a movie that kind of gets
Yeah.
it right is, as slow burn go, would be if you've seen House of the Devil. That movie I
Oh
really
God, I love
love.
House of the
Not a whole
Devil.
lot happens, but I'm
Mhm.
liking this character enough. Right, and I'm liking this character because I'm thinking to myself, all right, if I was a college age guy about her age, that's someone I would want to go on a date with. That's how likable
Mhm.
that character is, and therefore, when shit
Mhm.
hits the fan, you kind of feel bad for her. So now her friend, on the
Mhm.
other hand, Greta Gerwig, I think, when she gets her face blown off, I'm cool with that too. But
See, and I really I thought Greta
anyhow,
Gerwig was. Yeah,
That's
no, I
me.
thought it's okay. I thought that Greta was fun for who her character was fun for who she was. She was that typical,
Oh yeah.
best friend character. But yeah, I completely agree with you. I love House of the Devil. It's an example of, I think, a way to tell a kind of story that's been told over and over and over again in a way that feels familiar but also feels new. And it's got, I thought it was dead on. I was heavily devoted to Ty West after seeing it because I'm like, okay, you set out to do something and you could not have nailed it harder. So I trust him usually with his movies, and he does likable characters really
Yeah.
well, in my opinion. Yeah,
Yeah, I
even
mean,
with
and there's a recent
oh,
Final Girl that I think we. Well, I was gonna
please
say
go
the
ahead.
character
Hmm.
Maxine from X. Well, no, but in
Hmm.
Maxine, I mean, she's a
Hmm.
bit of a badass too, which is what I like too. Played by Mia Goth.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And Mia's excuse me, Mia's very good at that too. Mia's very good at taking, I think, whatever material you give her and making that character likable. She has this sort of natural, sympathetic kind of air to her. Like, I would put her in the same category as I realize, this is kind of an easy, probably feels like a low hanging fruit, but I would put her in the same school as Christina Ricci as an actress because Christina Ricci is the same way. No matter what kind of character she's playing, it's impossible to hate her. And I think the same thing is true of Mia Goth.
That's a really good comparison because I could see that she is kind of in that same era as because you would see Christine Ricci play different roles. Sometimes she's kind of an evil bitch sometimes, but sometimes she is the heroine as well, and sometimes both in the same in this movie, maybe even and like Barbara Steele in some of her older movies, like in Black Sunday, for example, she's playing both the protagonist and antagonist in that.
Yeah. No, it's true. And I just think, yeah. And so that's important too. It does also kind of come down to casting sometimes. And I think that Mia Goth has been really well cast in pretty much everything she's been in. And she's been able to bring that likability to the majority of her characters. And so no matter what the movie is, if Mia Goth is in it, I'm going to enjoy watching her.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Well, so since you're I guess tell every well, I think we've already said, but tell everyone where you can find your YouTube channel. The name of it. It's Final Girl Friday, correct?
Yeah. So it's just my YouTube is at Final Girl Friday YT. Because at Final Girl Friday was taken for some reason. But yeah, so at Final Girl Friday YT, and my podcast is still available. There's 4 years worth of content over there, and it's also Final Girl Friday. It's available on like Spotify, Apple Podcasts, a variety of platforms, and you can find me on Instagram at Molly Oblivion. I'm on Threads as well. So yeah,
I kind of left Threads, but we'll talk about that afterwards.
that's fair.
But
That's
anyhow,
totally fair.
yeah. Well, terrific. Well, it was great having you on. Looking forward to more videos from you and seeing what other movies I can discover through you. So I'm already learning a lot more. One thing about the horror genre, just when you think you've seen it all, you've only you've only scraped the surface
So true.
normally.
So
So
very true.
thank you
What
for
I
coming
love
on
about it.
tonight.
No, thank you so much for having me. And I'm sorry for rambling. And again, I'm so sorry about our delay, but I am really glad to have been here and just I
No, not
appreciate
at
getting
all.
to hang out and talk about movies.
This show works best when the guest rambles and I just stay silent. So that's the so. But
No, but it was great. It was really
to
fun.
everyone that's watching the show live or sees it later, make sure to like, share, and subscribe, and check out Molly's channel, Final Girl Friday. And we'll see everyone later in the month. Thank you, everyone. Bye.